Hey everybody, Ishao here. So we're gonna make a kind of continuation of what we did in the last video, but we're gonna go into a little bit more detail about stuff that we missed to cover. The previous video became roughly 38 minutes long, and there was still some topics left to cover because we kind of want to prove certain things, the authenticity of the religion, and we want to compare different things. So here's a slideshow instead where we can have a look at some exhibitions from the different things throughout history. So this one here is Judgment Day, which is right around now that the Mahdi has appeared, Mr. Successor and Antichrist person. So we're going to do a deep dive into murder and lies and religion. The authenticity of the Quran is where we want to start. If you are from the Abrahamic faith, you should know that God loves you deeply, and you should know the truth. You deserve to know everything about your religion and all the other ones, and you should definitely be a spiritual person if you want to be. This is not an insult of your religion, this is just facts, and you can consult with your local Google and Wikipedia if you want to know more about this. Here is an interesting quote from the book. If you find people who do homosexual stuff, you should kill them because it's pretty bad that people are in love. But we live in the 21st century, so we don't have to worry about that. But this is one of the reasons why it is not compatible with Christianity. So we're going to take a deep dive into the Hadith and stuff from the commentaries and other books as well to understand where the book comes from. Because a lot of people claims there is only one version of the book, it's only been written once, there's no other versions, there's no other dialects, there is no other things, but we're going to kind of go through it and see what we're going to learn from all this. So when it comes to Uthman and his way of handling the Quran, there was a couple of ones that was burnt. And because they were burnt, we miss a lot of surahs, we miss a lot of verses from these holy books, and therefore we want to understand what happened to these, or what was the events that led up to these things. And the second red paragraph, in case they disagree about certain verses, they would bring someone who had knowledge of which verse the Prophet was reciting, along with 3 prominent individuals from Medina. And on the third paragraph at the bottom, we find, as far as the number of Uthman's copies is concerned, I said Ottoman earlier, I meant Uthman. And as far as the number of Uthman's copies is concerned, al-S2E2 tells us that the number varies between 4, 5, 7. Uthman had 7 copies. They were sent to Mecca, Sham, Damascus, Yemen, Bahrain, Basra, Kufa, and Medina. On the second page, we find complaint to Uthman about variations in the recitation of the Quran. And the last paragraph, Uthman told the 3 Qurayshites that wherever they differ from Zaid in the recitation of the Quran and its pronunciation, it should be written in the dialect of Quraysh. So it's not Arabic, since it was revealed in that dialect. And so there's lots of people arguing when it comes to the authenticity of the book, and that there was only one dialect, there was only one language, and therefore there's not any. But when we look at the history of it, we find that there was actually lots of different things going on 2,000 years ago and in the 700 AD. Muhammad said the Quran was revealed in 7 dialects. All of them are right and perfect. When Uthman banned whichever he banned from the Quran and burned whichever he burned, he banned passages Allah has revealed and burned parts of the Quran which were given to the Muslims by the Messenger of Allah. to rewrite the Quran and left out those who heard the Prophet and memorized what he said. Uthman took him out of the mosque with violence and struck him to the ground and broke one of its ribs. So there was some drama concerning the first Qurans in the verses. And so one of the biggest arguments that Muslim people say is that, oh, but the Bible has been edited. The original Bible is not the same Bible, and you have the King James Version and the Geneva Version and the New Living Translations. But the Quran is one book, and there's only one book, and it's always been one book. But we can find a lot of interesting, juicy parts in the scripture and in the hadiths and the commentary and in other books as well. He concluded that the Quran evolved only gradually in the 7th and 8th centuries during a long period of oral transmission. The reason that no Islamic source material from the 1st century of Islam has survived, Wansbrough concluded that one Quran never existed, meaning there is no original. And that's kind of sad. Yesterday we covered a lot of topics as well, or in the previous video. And so here we're kind of taking another deep dive into the stuff. Since there are no Arabic chronicles from the 1st century in Islam, the two looked at several non-Muslim 7th century accounts that suggested Muhammad was perceived not as the founder of a new religion, but as the preacher in the Old Testament tradition, hailing the coming of a Messiah. Yes. For the sake of brevity, I am confined myself to the Prophet's biography and omitting some of the things which Ishaq recorded in the book. I have omitted things which are disgraceful to discuss, matters which would distress people, and such report as al-Bukat told me he could not accept as trustworthy. All of these things I have omitted. So there are essentially accounts of surahs being removed, or as talked about in the previous video, a Medina surah version and a Mecca, and then they kind of was joined together, and one is more spiritual and poetic and the other one is more legalese and structured. So moving on to the next topic, the Dunub Kabira, or just sin, essentially, Danab, I think is pronounced, is essentially something you should not be doing according to the Quran. And those things that we should not be doing is also something that the Prophet should not be doing, and Moses should not, and David, and Isho, and all these people should not be doing, because there is no real difference between a normal person and a prophet. The only difference is that they are anointed, or that they have a connection to angels and whatnot. So here goes some stuff that Muhammad did during his lifetime that if any Muslim were to do, they would have been punished. Ordering or participating in killing. Whoever kills a believer intentionally, their recompense is hell. Surah An-Nisa 4, verse 93. Executions of Banu Qurayza, male member after the Battle of the Trench, based on the verdict by Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, but Muhammad approved it. Military expeditions resulting in deaths of opponents. From a secular view, these are battlefields, acts of war punishments. Traditional Islam consider them justified, but judged as a civilian act, it would be classified as murder or extrajudicial killing. So if a normal person does this in Afghanistan or in Iraq, it would not be permitted. When it comes to marrying more than 4 women at once, we talked about polygamy yesterday in the previous video, that there is 1, 2, 3, or 4, but if you fear you'll not be just, then marry only once. Exception for Muhammad. This is only for you, not for the rest of believers. From Surah Al-Ahzab. Analysis says, if an ordinary Muslim had married more than 4 women, it would violate Quranic law. Since the verse explicitly states it's an exception, if a non-prophet did this, it would be a major sin. Danab. When it comes to taking war booty for himself, it is not for any prophet to take unlawfully from the booty. Surah Al-Imran 3, verse 161. This verse implies a warning against the misappropriating spoils of war. Muhammad receives a fifth of the booty by Quranic allowance, but this too was unique to his role. If a regular person took a share of public or war property this way, it would be theft or unjust enrichment. Another thing that one person can do that other people cannot do. Concealing or altering divine instruction. We mentioned briefly yesterday the Satanic Verses and the cranes and the daughters of Allah that was inserted and altered. Woe to those who write the book with their own hands and then say this is from Allah. Surah Al-Baqarah 2 verse 79. The Satanic Verses incident, not found in the Quran today but mentioned in some early Islamic sources, is sometimes cited by critics as an example of attributing words to God incorrectly. If this event were accepted literally and committed by an ordinary Muslim, it would be a grave sin of falsely claiming revelation. Causing distress to others for personal reasons. Do not turn away the poor. Do not let hatred of a people prevent you from being just. Surah Al-Ma'idah 5 verse 8. Frowning at the blind man, Abasa 80, and harsh treatment of certain tribes or critics would be seen as cruelty, injustice, or neglect of the needy, all morally condemned in the Quran. Number 6. Marrying his adopted son's ex-wife. There is no blame on the Prophet in what Allah has made obligatory. Surah Al-Azab. Context: Muhammad married Zainab bint Yash, the former wife of Zayd ibn Haritha, his adopted son. The Quran addresses and justifies this act, abolishing the legal adoption precedent. While the Quran makes it lawful, critics argue that this would have violated tribal norms and could be viewed as immoral or hypocritical in a secular framework. Number 7, permitting sexual access to slave women, except from their wives or those their right hand possesses. Surah Al-Muminun 23 verse 6. This refers to female captives of war being taken as concubines. Quran permits it, but from a modern human rights lens, this would be classified as sexual abuse or rape, particularly if done without consent. And this was 2,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago. Obviously, this kind of practice is not very standard today, even for Christian standards or for moderate Muslims. But it happened under Muhammad's watch, and he was allowed to do so because he had a get-out-of-jail-free card. Number 8, ordering assassinations or executions of critics. Alleged execution of poets like Asma bint Marwan, Kab ibn al-Ashraf, etc. The Quran prohibits, let there be no compulsion in religion. Surah Al-Baqarah 2 verse 256. If true and done by regular Muslims, these would be murders of dissenters or journalists, major sins in Islamic law and ethics. So, one of the things that Muhammad did was that he tortured a Jew to find some money or treasure. Torture him until you extract what he has. So he kindled a fire with flint and steel on his chest until he was nearly dead. Then the apostle delivered him to Muhammad, and he struck off his head in revenge for his brother Mahmud. And this shows another thing that we talked about yesterday. When it comes to the Christian nonviolence, turning the other cheek, this was obviously an act of revenge with some greed sprinkled on top. After the Battle of Khaybar, a Jewish man named Kinana ibn al-Rabi was reportedly tortured to reveal hidden treasure. Sources like Ibn Ishaq Sirah states he was burned with hot iron on his chest, and after refusing to disclose more, he was executed. He was asked about the treasure. He denied knowing where it was. Then a man from the Jews came and said he had seen Kinana walk around some ruins. The messenger of God ordered that the ruins be excavated, and some of the treasure was found. He asked him again, but he denied the rest, so the Prophet ordered to torture him until he talked. The Quranic stance is, do not let hatred of people prevent you from being just. Be just, that is nearer to righteousness, from Surah Al-Ma'idah 5:8. And the bottom verse states, whoever kills a soul, it is as if he has slain mankind entirely. Surah Al-Ma'idah 5 verse 32. That's a very interesting verse. Can kind of agree with that, because you kill a part of yourself, killing someone else, so it is as if you have killed mankind. Let's talk about al-Abyad, the white one, because it is pretty clear to people that a prophet, an anointed, a messenger, or someone chosen by God has had some form of revelation or some form of interaction with angels. And usually the first one that people get to know is Gabriel, which acts as a mediator between the divine and the person. In the personal case of myself, Gabriel was one of the first angels that I met a couple of years ago at the age of 23, who helped me meditate and do some inner healing within myself. And then I worked with some other angels like Michael and Raphael and Uriel as well. So it kind of falls in line with the journey of the prophet. And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. And also in the Revelation, it says that when the Antichrist appears and or the devil, it will come in white colors, very bright light. Al-Abyad, Murra al-Abyad Abu al-Harith, the white one, father of the light. Aba al-Nur or Mara, the white king. Malik al-Abyad is the lord of Monday, the moon, Kumar, the color white, the metal silver, and is monitored by the angel Gabriel. Al-Abyad was the devil who tempted the hermit Barsisa. He is said to be the closest to Satan in the court. So, yesterday in the previous video, we went through the Satanic Verses, upon which Gabriel spoke to Muhammad. So the Quraysh have accepted Islam, some rose up to return, while others remained behind. Then Gabriel came to the messenger of God and said, Muhammad, what have you done? You have recited to the people that which I did not bring you from God, and you have said that which was not said to you. Then the messenger of God was much grieved and feared God greatly. But God sent down a revelation to him, for he was merciful to him, consoling him and making the matter light for him, informing him that there had never been a prophet or a messenger before him who desired as he desired and wished as he wished, but that Satan had cast words into his recitation as he had cast words on Muhammad's tongue. Then God canceled what Satan had thus cast and established his verses by telling him that he was like other prophets and messengers. So this is the same thing that we talked about yesterday. He was trying to cater to the Quraysh. They were pagan. They were following their Arab idols. And Muhammad had a hard time convincing them. So he did something he shouldn't have done, because we'll get to that in a moment. But here is essentially the standard way of doing fasting, or a kind of recommended way, you could say. Fast for 40 days for the sake of God, abstaining from all meat products and byproducts. After the obligatory prayer, you must recite the conjuration 100 times, and then recite the Surah Al-Jinn 3 times. Emphasis on the word jinn. So in Islam, there is jinns, and in other cultures, jinns is not the very best thing to contact or work with. Then the incense are the Muklil, Azruk, and Ud. And on the last day, you recite the conjuration with the incense, Luban Zakar, until he comes with his army. The king Abyad will assist all your needs after making an agreement with you. So this is kind of the problem with the devil, right? Is that he wants to make a contract, he wants to make a deal, and we'll be looking at Matthew 4, verse 1 through 11 in a moment. But essentially, Muhammad did not defeat Abyad. He did not deter it. He did not turn it down, because this is essentially the recommendation for how you do the conjuration. And who is this thing then? From the Al-Qurtubi 242 verse 19, by the demon called Al-Abyad, the white one, he was referring to the one that used to come to the prophet in the form of Gabriel, the angel, wanting to seduce him. Oh, interesting. very interesting. So Al-Abyad is essentially pretending to be Gabriel, wanting to be in light. And if you are not divine, or if you don't have discernment, then it is easy to fall for these kind of tricks, etc. And so this is an excerpt about Waraka himself. Wasn't completely certain at first that the spirit who appeared to Muhammad was Gabriel, since he suspected that it might have been Shaitan or a demon. I am afraid it may be someone other than Gabriel, for certain devils imitate him, and by doing so can mislead and corrupt some men. Amazingly, some expositors even admitted that Muhammad had a Satan named Al-Abyan the White, who would appear to him in the form of Gabriel. Some of the commentators mentioned that Muhammad had an enemy from among the demons of the jinns, whose name was the White, and he used to appear to him in the image of Gabriel. But we say that God bestowed on the prophet the necessary knowledge by which he would discern between Gabriel and the demon. Waraka died shortly after Muhammad started having these experiences, and never got to hear the message that Muhammad would eventually bring. Had he continued to live and actually learnt what Muhammad would have preached later about Jesus Christ and his cross, Waraka may not have been so keen to support him, and may have come to the realization that his fears that he was one of the devils who appeared to Muhammad was correct. So, this is from Matthew 4, chapter 1, 11. We covered this in the Christianity video, the occult origins of Christianity, but essentially, this is the template and essentially the way for a normal person to learn how to defeat their own ego, their own psyche, and what's known as the archetype of the devil. And because of that, we have solid proof from the Bible that Isho was able to deter and defeat Satan. But based on what we've seen so far about Al-Abyad taking the form of Gabriel and deceiving, plus the Satanic Verses that was cast upon his tongue, sad to say, Muhammad may not have been one of the few people in history, in religious history, that was able to defeat the devil. We've already read this one in the previous video, and so we don't really have to go through it again. But a few points that we want to look at is that the devil says to him at the end, all these things will I give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me. And this will be important in a moment, because we'll be looking at something. Essentially, in the conjuration, you fast, and then Al-Abyad, the White One, come to you and gives you an offer, a contract, or as this here, he will give him the kingdom and the riches of the world. Jesus, aka Isho, did not take this offer. He rejected it fully. And when it comes to Buddha, from Buddhism, Mara, the evil one, very interesting here, the name, because in the previous slide we have Mara in Arabic, and now we have Mara again. So is it the same creature? Is it the devil? Is it the ego? Of course it is. Mara, the evil one, having known with his own mind the reflection. So in Buddhism, in this part here, we also covered this in a previous video, but essentially the devil appears in a reflection inside the mind of these spiritual and religious prophets and bodhisattvas. And then Buddha said to himself, oh, this is Mara, the evil one. And then they have a conversation back and forth, and then he says, yeah, you're defeated, Endmaker. And Mara, the evil one, he was sad and disappointed, and he disappeared. So in Matthew 4:11, we find at the bottom and the devil leaves him, and behold, angels came and ministered upon him, and here we have disappeared. So essentially, very similar things, two different stories, but Jesus and Buddha managed to defeat the devil. This picture here is haram, and it does not exist. And if it does exist, it is in Topkaki Palace Library in Istanbul. And it depicts the ascension of Muhammad. Or it doesn't. It doesn't matter. But what's interesting is what's in the picture, because we see someone sitting on the ground, probably meditating and fasting or whatever. And then an angel shows up with a platter, which looks like a little building, a little river, little trees and flowers, almost like a kingdom coming to him, and is offering it to him. And so, based on what we just discussed earlier, we have Isho, Mr. Christ, denying the kingdom and that the thing that the devil offers to him. And we also have Mara trying to tempt Buddha, and both of them fails. But in this case, not so much. The problem was that Muhammad most likely could not tell the difference between the White One and Gabriel. And because of that, he was sadly led astray. So, when it comes to people in religion in the past who's been able to defeat the archetype of the devil, aka the ego, the psyche, the adversary, the liar, the thief, and the murderer, we find Isho at the top, defeating Satan in the wilderness and resisting the temptations while fasting. We find Buddha Siddhartha in Buddhism under the Bodhi tree, defeating Mara, ignoring temptations, fear, and illusions, and attaining enlightenment. We find Zarathustra from Zoroaster, defeating Angra Mainyu, and through lifelong rejection of lies and dualistic evil. We find Krishna in Hinduism, defeating Kamsa and demons in Asura forms, and Rama in Hinduism. We have Job from Judaism, defeating Satan as a tester, maintaining faith despite extreme suffering and loss. Moses in Judaism. The Pharaoh is then the archetype of the devil here in that case. And we have Saint Anthony the Great, Saint Francis of Assisi, and we have Milarepa in Tibetan Buddhism. This is a list of people that actually managed to do it. These are probably very inspirational people, but we're going to get into more stuff about these people later. But essentially saying that Muhammad doesn't qualify for having defeated the devil, because if he would have truly known the truth about his own ego and psyche, he would have known that killing people, taking wives, multiple wives, raping people, killing women, etc., is not very good and not really in line with the divine, which would be more in the it would be more in the area of the ego to do such greedy things. And then we have some stuff from Islam here with Muhammad, Barsisa, Adam, Eve, Solomon, and Harut and Marut. And some of these people managed to do it and some people didn't because they got deceived. Adam and Eve being one of the first people in the Old Testament being deceived by Kali the snake, Mr. Devil telling them to eat the apple, etc. So it's a reoccurring theme that we are tempted by things that we're not supposed to be doing because it's not good for us or it's not good for other people. And the prophets, the messengers, the anointed, the archangels, etc., they are all on different scales of how good they are at discerning between selfish, lower desire and higher spiritual desire, which is better. Which leads us into the next topic. If you are a Muslim, then you know the nafs, the self, the soul, and the ego. And that is the most important thing for you to keep in track of when it comes to your spiritual development. Everything is about nafs. Everything is about realizing what nafs is. And everything is about questioning nafs, because that is where Al-Abyad hides, and that is where he will appear, and that's where he will trick you. So you will have to meditate and contemplate in order to defeat that thing that hides in nafs, which is yourself and the ego. The most important thing that you can do is not the jihad. Jihad is not the battle. Jihad is not invading countries. Jihad is not the conquer. It is jihad al-Nafs, which is the struggle against the self, against temptation, against evil, against lies, against greed, against thievery, against murder and selfishness. Jihad al-Nafs is the most important jihad that you will ever do, because it is al-Jihad al-Akbar, the greater jihad. And the greater jihad is not about conquering the world. It is about conquering yourself, conquering your nafs. When you do this, you become enlightened, you become blissful, you become one with God, one with the holy, when you complete the greater jihad within yourself, in your heart, and in your mind. In the New Testament, we find Isho, the Christ, committing no sin. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but we have one who has been tempted in every way just as we are, yet was without sin. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. Can any of you prove me guilty of sin? If I am telling the truth, why don't you believe me? And in the Old Testament prophecy of Isaiah, we find, though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. So when it comes to Danub and sin, we find that some people are more in line with trying their best, doing their best, and also succeeding and not sinning. And then we find other people like Moses killing an Egyptian who was beating a Hebrew and then hiding the body, thou shalt not murder, and then fleeing the justice of this murder, abandoning one's people. Very interesting. Thank you, Moses. Neglecting to circumcise his son. Oh, that's interesting. And we find reluctance to obeying God's command to confront the Pharaoh. And in this case, the Pharaoh is a representation of the devil, so that means that Moses was not really wanting to confront his ego and overcoming and becoming enlightened. Striking the rock instead of speaking to it, taking credit for miracles. Shall we bring water out of this rock? And then not really crediting God for it. We have Moses breaking the tablets of the law. In anger, Moses smashes the stone tablets, which is really bad because it's a sacred object and uncontrolled anger. We've got ordering killing of idolaters. After the golden calf incident, Moses commanded the Levites to kill 3,000 Israelites. Mass killing without trial. We got sins of David, adultery with Bathsheba. David sleeps with Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah, one of his loyal soldiers. You shall not commit adultery. We have the murder of Uriah. David sends order to have Uriah placed in the front lines and abandoned so he will be killed. Deception and cover-up. David tries to trick Uriah into sleeping with his wife to cover up the pregnancy. You shall not bear false witness. Do not deceive your neighbor. Polygamy and accumulation of wives. David took many wives and concubines. Got prideful census of Israel. David orders a military census, apparently motivated by pride and reliance on numbers instead of God. Failure to punish rape and incest in his family. David does not punish his son Amnon for raping Tamar, nor does he act justly to prevent further family collapse. We got failure to prevent or intervene in Absalom's coup. David repeatedly failed to discipline or guide his sons, leading to rebellion, civil war, and more death. And fun fact, there is Absalom, the father of peace, which is the same as my first name. Taking back Michal, his first wife, after giving her away. David demands the return of Michal, though she had been married off to another man who loved her. And so that's kind of trying to steal someone else's wife. And then allowing Joab and other commanders to commit injustices. David fails to restrain or punish Joab for several murders. And so and so. And here we have sins of Solomon. Idolatry. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not bow down to them. Solomon worshipped Ashtoreth, Moloch, and Chemosh, foreign gods of his wives. Interesting. Promoting idol worship. built high places for false gods on the hills near Jerusalem. Marrying foreign women who led him to sin. Had 700 wives and 300 concubines, many of whom were from forbidden nations. I'm going to go on top of my head here. I'm just going to say Genghis Khan here for a second because, it sounds kind of funny. Polygamy and concubinage grossly violated the limit and spirit of marital monogamy prescribed. Very, very interesting. We got accumulating excessive wealth, amassed immense wealth, shares in horses. Well, he was a king after all. Acquiring horses from Egypt. That was not allowed at the time. He imported horses from Egypt. Kind of funny, like a trade tariff bargain thing. Turning away from God's covenant. God directly warned him twice, yet Solomon disobeyed. According to the Hindu scriptures of rules at the time, the Hindu texts don't explicitly state that the Buddha committed personal sins after his enlightenment. However, certain later Hindu texts critique him for promoting an alternate spiritual path that diverged from the Vedic traditions, but these criticisms are theological rather than moral transgressions. And in Buddhism, the Buddha is viewed as free from sin, having attained the highest state of spiritual realization. So we got two people with the number 0 here, and all the other people seem to be racking up a score. And we have Mr. Job, living in Sodom, even though God didn't really want him to live there, and Sodom went to shit, offering his daughters to the mob, which was not really what he should have done, but it happened anyway. And incest with his daughters, engaging in immoral and sinful acts with his daughters. Interesting. Here we have Mr. Dalai Lama doing a little bit of tongue practice with a young boy. This happened roughly 2 years ago, implying that the Dalai Lama, even him, is not free from scrutiny. So he got a -1 and also lack of aura. So on this next topic, we're going to be discussing the thing known as a Baphomet. And a Baphomet is something that is associated with demon worship and black magic and stuff like that. However, did you know that Baphomet actually comes from the Templars? So essentially, what happened was that the Templars would go on crusades in the Middle East, and they would come back with heretic religions. They were fighting Islam. So what happened was that the word for Muhammad became Baphomet in French. And because of that, these Templars, and probably fraternities and so, was worshipping Muhammad against the laws of the Vatican and the Church, because it was heretical and was blasphemous. So essentially, Baphomet can mean two things, kind of a slang of Mahomet, or it could also mean baptized in wisdom. But what's striking, interesting about this is that there is a goat head on this thing, and there is a moon. And the moon is the crescent with a little star inside, which is a symbol from Islam. So it is very likely that Baphomet and Muhammad has a connection. If you didn't know that, now you know. And therefore, you got to be careful with these things because you don't want to worship demons, especially people who recite Satanic verses or are tricked by Al-Abyad, the White One, and does not defeat the devil. So it kind of falls in line with what we know so far. Let's go through some final verdicts and scores for these people. We have Isho, Jesus, Christianity, number of sins, 0, supposedly. People killed, 0. People who died, himself, resurrected. Maybe Judas died in his case. Moses, Judaism, Christianity, number of sins, 1. Well, you could argue because we just looked through that. And people who got killed, 1. And people who died because of Moses, 2 million plus, the Exodus, plagues, Red Sea drowning. Good work, Moses. Really good. We have David from Judaism, Christianity, 2 to 3 sins, maybe more. People he killed by hand, 0. However, 20,000+ people who died because of them through warfare, particularly with the Philistines and other nations. We got Solomon from Judaism and Christianity. We've got idolatry. We got Lots of sins going on there. 10,000 people dying because of internal conflict due to idolatry, division of Israel leading to wars. We got Muhammad from Islam. 0 sins. Well, if you change the definition of sin and what a danib is, obviously it's going to be 0. But we went through it already, and so we already know what he did. People killed by his own hand. 2,000 people. Like a new record. And people who died because of him, 100,000, wars and conquest and early Islamic expansion. We got Krishna from Hinduism, 0, sinless, but had some controversial actions in the Mahabharata. Killed 0 people except for Kamsa or other indirectly through wars. And people who died because of him, 100,000 people in the Mahabharata war, which was partially initiated by Krishna. Beneath him, we have Abraham, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, 2 sins, lied about Sarah being his sister. 0 people died by his hands, but 1,000 people died because of him, indirectly led to conflicts between his descendants, Isaac versus Ishmael. At the bottom of the list here, we find not a religious leader per se, but Alexander the Great of the Macedonian Empire. 0 in terms of sin, but they didn't really have sin back then. Killed 20,000 people in numerous military campaigns, and because of him, 1 million plus people died in conquest from Greece to India, leading to the death of millions in battles and subsequent invasions. And at the bottom, we have a personal favorite, just kidding, Napoleon Bonaparte of the French Empire, Christianity and Catholic, 0 sins, maybe a small pecker, and he killed 2 million plus people in numerous military campaigns, and because of him, 5 million plus people died. Napoleonic Wars, a European conflict, and leading to widespread deaths. So, in terms of who is sinless and who can throw the stone, because no, they can't. Yeah, these are the people you worship. These are the people you love. These are the people you look up to. And because of that, you should know they were murderers from the beginning, and they were also liars. Boom. Here we have top 10 people excluding religious figures, or, not just specifically. Mr. Hitler, political leader, killed 70 million plus people. You could say 150 if you want to be generous. Joseph Stalin, Mr. Communist, 20 million people, the Great Purge, forced labor camps, famine. Mao Zedong from China, 45 million with a great leap forward in a cultural revolution. Genghis Khan should actually be at the top, but, the people have probably surpassed him, I guess. Military leader of the Mongol Empire, 40 million people died by his hand. And 40 million people died because of him, because of conquest and destructions of cities and massacres. We have Alexander the Great again, Napoleon Bonaparte, King Leopold II, the colonial leader of Belgium, Congo. Because of him, 10 million people died in Congo's Free State genocide and forced labor. We got Hirohito, political leader in Japan. 10 million people died in World War II in the Pacific Theater. And we got, at the bottom, Saddam Hussein from Iraq. 10,000 people in chemical attacks. And 250,000 people in the Gulf War dying. And at the bottom, we have another favorite, friends with Mao Zedong, Mr. Pol Pot from Cambodia, at 1.7 million people with a Khmer rogue genocide, forced labor, starvation. So, in terms of humans and religious leaders and prophets and messengers, it goes straight into this list of murderers and killers and liars who are not Christians but pretend to be Christians, who are wolves in sheep clothing. And because of that, no one is perfect, I guess, and no one is like sinless or whatever. But this just points out the hypocrisy of all the religions and all the countries and all the stuff that's been going on for the last 7,000 years. So it doesn't matter. Muhammad is part of them. The Moses people is part of them. David did a lot of stupid shit. And then these people did a lot of stupid things. And so because of that, it is what it is, right? So now we've reached the end. Or is this the beginning? Really? Well, essentially, the religion that you're worshiping has lots of holes, lots of fallacies. And that goes for Judaism, it goes for Christianity, it goes for Islam, it goes for Hinduism, and perhaps also Buddhism when you take into account all the countless wars in China and the Ming Dynasty that happened over several hundred years. No one is perfect, right? But you got to realize that some people are not prophets. Some people are not messengers. Some people are working for the Vatican. Some people are working against the Vatican. Some people get concubines from the Vatican as a gift. Some people recite stupid verses. Some people do this and this and that. In the Hidden Origins of Christianity, we cover some of the stuff about Isho and how he went through certain things like Egypt and how he went to India and he learned Dharma, which would have meant that he was a Dharma teacher. He wasn't even in line with Christianity, but he had to teach the Mlechas, the barbarians, using their own faith, meaning that he adopted Judaism, he changed it, and gave it back to them, and that became Christianity. But originally, he might have been a Dharma teacher, which would mean that Christianity is a Hindu denomination. But you wouldn't get many people agreeing to that. So this is the end of this lecture. And this has been essentially a debunking, a red pill of all the stuff that has happened in all of these denominations and different religions. And therefore, this is a continuation of the video from yesterday because of Mr. Mahdi, Mr. Abdullah. He went out and said he is the successor of so-and-so and this person, and he is the successor of that, and he is so-and-so. He didn't say he was a reincarnation of anyone. He didn't say anything about the evil elites, and he didn't say anything about religion at all. Personally, the 10-minute message that he had for the rest of the world was just word salad, essentially. Like, you didn't learn anything from listening to him. And people who say, obey, 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 and sit down and stand up and you must oblige. No, come on, man. Like, just give up. So spirituality is something for you on the inside. It's through your heart. It's through your mind. Something for you to realize, because the kingdom is not of this world. It is up here. Whoever finds the kingdom within himself, he shall know. And therefore, thank you very much for listening to this lecture, and be safe. We'll be uploading more videos in the future. But you can consider this chapter to be debunked with the Vatican, with Islam, with Hinduism, with Buddhism, with Judaism, Egyptian pantheon, and the Book of Enoch, and all the stuff that we've gone through so far. There's lots for you to learn about these things, and you can study them on yourself. And now, with the help of things like ChatGPT and AI, you are able to ask questions about things. The only thing is that scientism believes that we crawl out of the ocean, we evolved from fish and monkeys, and there was dinosaurs and stuff like that. Because of that, you can say the AI is a little bit biased. But if you just ask it to recite texts like the Brishna Purana or the Vedas or texts or whatever, you will find lots of different glimpses, little nuggets. And then you can say, okay, compare this to this. Compare this god to this god. Compare these deities to these deities. Compare the Old Norse to the Greek and the Roman to the Greek and the Egyptian to the Greek. And then you will find the red tapestry, the thread going through it all. And because of that, the truth is out there, and you can find it within yourself and without yourself. And then you will know that all of this is bogus BS. And we've been deceived, we've been tricked, we've been lied to, we've been controlled. It's been a political control of all countries and feudal lords throughout history. And because of that, good luck finding the truth, and then good luck finding God, and good luck finding your spiritual journey and the love and the beauty therein. So thank you very much.